This is the case I return to most often, not because of what happened during the displacement, because of what happened to the 30 years after it.
Welcome to Displaced. I'm your host, Mara Saleh, and that, of course, is Dr. Henrik Voss, the man leading these incredible and often unsettling temporal experiments. Henrik, today's file is number 21, The Quiet That Followed. An English country doctor displaced for 4 minutes into a municipal park who thought it was a dream, told no one, and spent the rest of his life quietly, irrevocably different.
This is another long shadow episode. We won't be showing the displacement.
Because it isn't the point.
Because it was 4 minutes in a park, and he thought it was a dream. The displacement was the least interesting thing that happened to him. His name is Thomas, 34 years old, a country physician in rural Shropshire, approximately 1820 AD. He was reviewing patient notes when he was displaced. He arrived in a quiet municipal park, present day. Mild weather, a few people walking. Nothing dramatic.
He thought it was a dream.
He thought it was a vivid dream. The park was pleasant. Nothing frightening happened. He stood there for 4 minutes, observed the surroundings, and was returned to his surgery. His assistant noticed nothing unusual. Thomas said nothing. He went back to his notes.
That was it?
That was the displacement. 4 minutes in a park. He thought it was a dream and filed it accordingly. But something happened to the 30 years after that.
What do you think he experienced in those 4 minutes?
He saw the world continue. That's my reading of it, and its inference. I want to be clear about that. He couldn't have known what he was looking at. The park was present day, but nothing in it would have announced itself as such to a man from 1820. He saw people walking, buildings in the distance, a world going about its business.
And?
I think, and this is entirely my interpretation, that something in that 4 minutes registered below the level of conscious processing. Not that the world would continue in any specific way. Just that it would. That there would be parks and people walking in them, and life continuing. He classified it as a dream, and went back to work. But I believe it got into him anyway.
How do you know?
His correspondence, his patient records, the specific shape of what changed in his practice over the following decades.
What do you think he was carrying, if you had to name it?
I think he was carrying the knowledge that the world continues, that it does not end with any individual life or any individual moment of difficulty. He saw a park, people walking, a world going about its ordinary business. Something in that settled into him and never left.
A glimpse of continuity.
Without the language for it, without even the framework to know that is what it was. Just a 4-minute dream he never examined and never forgot.
And it made him kinder.
It made him more patient. His patients describe him as someone who seemed to already know that things usually turn out. Not as optimism, not that hollow brightness, as something he had seen.
What changed?
He became unusually interested in the long view. Not unusual for a physician to follow up with patients, but what we find in his records is follow-up correspondence extending years, sometimes decades. Patients he had treated in 1822 receiving letters from him in 1840. Families spanning generations. He wrote in a letter to a colleague that he found himself wanting to know how things turned out.
He didn't explain why.
He never explained it. It's not in any of his surviving correspondence. He simply had this habit, this specific need to know outcomes that his contemporaries found unusual and that he appears never to have examined directly.
Did he ever examine it?
Once. In his private journals, 1847, 27 years after the displacement. A single entry. It reads, "I believe I may have been somewhere once that I have never properly accounted for. I do not intend to account for it now, but I believe it may be the reason I keep asking how things turn out.
He knew.
He suspected. He chose not to examine it further. He went back to work.
Would he have been a good doctor without the displacement?
A different kind of good doctor. I have thought about that a great deal.
What is the difference?
The doctor he would have been. Competent, caring, thorough. The doctor he became. All of those things. And also someone who needed to know how things turned out. Who followed up across decades. Who kept the most complete rural health record in his county because he needed to see the arc of things.
It usually turns out. It usually does. He said that for 30 years.
And he meant it. He had seen the world continue, and he had built a practice from that knowledge. When he stood at the door of a sickbed and said, "It usually turns out," he meant it from something real.
That is a remarkable thing to have given his patients without knowing where it came from.
Yes, I think so too.
He spent 30 years shaped by something he never understood and never examined.
Yes.
You placed a 4-minute dream inside a man and shaped 30 years of his practice without his knowledge or consent.
Yes.
And his patients are better for it.
Yes.
Does the good outcome make it right?
No. The good outcome makes it fortunate. Right and fortunate are different things, and I try not to confuse them. What I did was take 4 minutes from a man without asking. What he did with the 30 years after that was entirely his. The weight of not knowing what had happened to him, I put that there. The good that came from it does not change that.
And his patients benefited from it. All those follow-up letters, all those outcomes he tracked.
His case notes are described by medical historians as the most complete rural health record from his county across 3 decades. An irreplaceable primary source. He had no way to know they would matter. He kept them anyway.
So the displacement produced something good?
The displacement produced a man who needed to know how things turned out. What he did with that need was good. Whether those are the same thing, I find I can't quite collapse them together.
Why not?
Because he carried something for 30 years that he was never given the chance to understand. The good that came from it doesn't change the weight of the carrying. He had a specific way of leaving a sickbed. His patients' families reported it consistently. He would pause at the door on the way out and say, without turning back, "It usually turns out, it usually does." He said that for 30 years, to rooms full of frightened people who needed to hear it. He meant it. I believe he meant it because 4 minutes in a park, in the middle of a dream he never examined, had shown him a world that continued. He didn't know what he'd seen. He built a life from it anyway. That is the case I return to most often. I suspect I always will. Some things get into you before you decide to let them, and they change you in directions you never examine, only notice, decades later, from the shape of the life you built.